Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time I covered the first part of the Battle of Peachtree Creek, where William Hardee's Corps went up against John Newton's single division and lost. Now, this video covers Confederate General William W. Loring's attack on the divisions of William Ward and John W. Geary. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, or purchase something from the Teespring store or Etsy shop. Every little bit helps. Thank you. The Confederate shift to the east when Benjamin Cheatham moved his corps all the way to the railroad that ran from Atlanta to Decatur allowed Hardee's corps to vastly outnumber the enemy force in his front, but he was unable to coordinate a successful attack against John Newton's division. However, his ability to outnumber the enemy made the Confederate left weak. Alexander P. Stewart's corps was to Hardee's left, and his one corps would run into elements of two Union corps, those under Joseph Hooker and John Palmer. On Stewart's right was the division of William W. Loring, with two brigades, one under Winfield Scott Featherston and the other under Thomas Scott. Those two brigades were positioned to take on a full Union division each. Featherston aimed at William Ward's division, and Scott aimed at John W. Geary's division. Hooker's corps wasn't fully prepared for an attack. Ward's men were at ease and didn't hear much of the roar of battle coming from their left while John Newton engaged the corps of William Hardee. Geary's division, on the other hand, was well prepared with the brigades stacked one behind the other. When Loring's division pushed forward, they encountered a strong Union skirmish line, but were easily able to shove them out of the way as they advanced toward the Union main line. However, the resistance did cause some confusion in the rebel ranks. When the Union skirmishers retreated, nearly half of Featherston's men halted, with only the 31st, 22nd, and 33rd Mississippi continuing their pursuit of the enemy. It also appears that Featherston himself didn't advance any further than the Union skirmish line. Scott's brigade on the left split when they encountered the skirmishers, with the consolidated 27th, 35th, and 49th Alabama and the 12th Louisiana moving to the left, as the other two Alabama regiments headed straight for the Union line. John Coburn commanded the brigade in the center of Ward's line and learned from skirmishers of the rebel attack. He quickly got his men into line and then informed his fellow brigadiers Benjamin Harrison and James Wood of the attack. Coburn advanced against the Mississippians, encountering the 22nd Mississippi. Harrison, a future president of the United States, soon got his brigade in motion as well, but there was a gap between the Union brigades. The 31st Mississippi in Harrison's front put up stiff resistance, and the rebel regiment began to extend its line to the right, with some of its troops getting on the flank and even into the rear of Harrison's brigade. Harrison's double line allowed him to shift his rear rank to the flank, sealing the breach and connecting his brigade with Coburn's brigade. The 31st Mississippi put up a fight against Harrison's troops. The Union brigadier feared his men were expending an extensive amount of ammunition. He sent his adjutant to bring up multiple boxes of ammunition from the ordnance wagons, and ordered others to raid the cartridge boxes of dead Union and Confederate soldiers. In the deadly hail of lead, every company commander of the 31st Mississippi was shot during the engagement. It got so bloodied from the attack that the first lieutenant took command of the entire regiment. Harrison kept his men moving, pushing all the way to the Collier Road, chasing away the units of Featherston's brigade who remained behind while their comrades had surged forward. Coburn's men joined alongside them. On the Confederate left, the Alabamians and Louisianians, who separated from their comrades, began to swing to the right, catching the blue-coated soldiers off guard and driving them deep behind their own lines. Geary was at or near the front lines attempting to restore order and pulling regiments from his rear ranks and throwing them forward. Patrick Henry Jones sent the 154th and 134th New York regiments to try to stem the tide of the Confederate flank attack. The rebel volleys drove back those regiments and continued to press the Union line. About this time, Harrison on the right of Ward's line got word that Geary's right flank was caved in and that he needed help, but Harrison couldn't disengage from the enemy in his front. Featherston's troops weren't making attacks, but they were keeping up a steady fire in their front. The 109th Pennsylvania moved west to help fight back against the rebels. As the Pennsylvanians moved toward the scene of the action, they saw the 29th Ohio retreating in great haste. Fergus Elliott of the 109th called on the Ohioans to rally around them, but the Buckeyes refused to stop. Just then a rebel bullet hit Sergeant Samuel Gord of the 109th, a good friend of Fergus Elliott. Elliott said, "Gord was a staunch friend of mine, and his death seemed to nerve me to do what I had first intended doing, make a stand." Elliott took the flag from the 29th's color bearer and inspired the remnants of the 29th to make a stand with the Pennsylvanians. The 147th Pennsylvania, led by R.E.O. Pardee, stood their ground while the other regiments around them fled. Pardee would write, "The disorganized masses of men as they rushed by the right of my line told a fearful tale. The men seemed to be panic-stricken, and I regret to say that there was manifest a lack of energy, coolness, and determination on the part of the officers, which was truly deplorable. One might conclude that destruction and defeat were inevitable." The caving in of Geary's line led to David Ireland responding quickly. He brought most of his brigade south to combat Scott's rebels. When the 149th New York engaged with the enemy, the rough terrain hid the enemy's whereabouts, and then a blast of musketry ripped into the New Yorkers' line, and as one soldier remembered, 35 men were gone in an instant. The small amount of rebels were able to hold off so many regiments coming to reinforce the Union line because 1, they had surprised Charles Candy and Jones's men, and 2, a ravine ran through the Union battle line, and with Scott's Alabamians and Louisianians standing on one side, it was nearly impossible for the Union regiments to climb the steep sides of the ravine to attack the Confederates. The Southerners fired volleys into the advancing enemy lines, driving them back down into the ravine repeatedly. However, the rough terrain that prevented Union troops from mounting a successful counterattack also kept Scott's men from driving the Union regiments further east. The Union regiments began to form an arc that would allow them to enfilade the rebels and put a halt to the advance. However, as Earl Hess in his book on the Battle of Peachtree Creek explained, despite the repulse, Scott's men achieved a remarkable feat. With scarcely 2/3 of a brigade, the Confederates disrupted and threw into confusion the majority of 3 Union brigades. They came closer than one could have expected to breaking through Geary's position. Only because Geary had depth in his formation were the Federals able to respond quickly enough to meet this threat. On the Confederate right, the 33rd Mississippi was battling with James Wood's brigade. Wood's men were late to the battle, and when the Mississippians pushed the 26th Wisconsin back into the rest of the brigade, the Southerners continued on and hit the flank of the 20th Connecticut. A member of the 33rd Mississippi remembered the bloody fight. "Suddenly I saw the beautiful emblem and its proud and brave bearer tumble to the earth. Oh, how my heart bled to see that noble man, that beautiful flag go down. But animated by a soul of flame, which death alone could extinguish, the next instant he was seen crawling towards the enemy on one hand and knees, dragging his beloved colors after him. All the death hail was rattling around us then, and many a noble man there fell to rise no more. Yet many a death-dealing blow was struck by us in return as we rushed despite all obstacles, right on to the front. I saw our beautiful flag no more, but was told that Silas C. Rushing snatched it from the ground and bore it proudly on until he, too, paid the penalty for his gallantry with his life's rich blood. Again it was snatched up by someone and borne onward until he, too, was shot down. Thus thrice our colors prostrated, and as often rose, when alas they fell to wave no more over the brave hearts that were wont to march beneath its beautiful folds. The men from Connecticut fell back a little bit, but then rallied and launched their own counterattack, driving back the 33rd Mississippi. Wood took up a position alongside the rest of the brigades in his division, and by 6 p.m., most of the major fighting along Geary's and Ward's line was over, with only skirmishing continuing into the late hours. Loring's attack, although with only 2 brigades, had caused 2 Union divisions great trouble, and in the case of Scott's brigade, nearly caved in the Union right, but the attacks had been disastrous for the Confederacy. For example, the 31st Mississippi lost 76.7% of their force on the slopes around Peachtree Creek. Ward, according to his own brigade commanders, wasn't even seen on the battlefield. Harrison, Coburn, and Wood acted on their own and coordinated with each other, without help from their division commander. To Loring's left, the divisions of Edward Walthall and Samuel French were about to collide with the divisions of Alpheus Williams and Richard Johnson. The en-echelon attack, ordered by Confederate Army Commander John Bell Hood, had thus far ended in defeat for each division that moved forward, but the battle wasn't over.